What character first comes to your mind when you hear the word badass? Maybe it's the ultimate hitman, Baba Yaga, John Wick. Maybe it's one of the most powerful Jedi turned evil Sith Lord, Darth Vader. Maybe it's the ghost of the Uchiha clan, Madara. Or is it possibly the ultimate rebel, Garo? If you asked a young me who he thought was the epitome of badassery, his answer would have probably been... Herobrine, the ultimate video game hoax, set to roam the overworld of Minecraft doing unspeakable deeds. Since his inception, many people have given their interpretations of this entity in the form of animations, or novels, or comic books. And let me tell you, I was a huge fan of the animations back in the day. I loved Minecraft, and especially Minecraft animations, and Herobrine was prevalent in a lot of them, so naturally he made up a lot of my screen time in my late childhood and early teens. This mysterious, super badass guy, who some interpretations showed as a god and others as a tragic victims of his circumstances, yes, I'm still talking about a video game hoax, has a special place in my heart. So just because I can and because you can't stop me, I'm making a video power scaling Herobrine. And since I am mainly a One Punch Man YouTuber, who better to put up against Herobrine than the entirety of this manga? This is pretty much my childhood versus my currenthood, and this matchup is actually a lot more interesting than it might seem at first glance. So without any further ado, let's jump straight into it. Starting with One Punch Man, if you're one of these people, you can click off now. I'm gonna tell you right now, Herobrine is not stronger than the freaking one above all, and if you think Saitama is, then have a nice day. Hope you enjoyed the video. But for everyone else, I'm still not going to get into exactly where I personally scaled the top tiers of the series like God and Saitama, because the scaling for these guys is super controversial and I do not want a civil war in my comments, so I'll just give multiple interpretations for the top tiers of the story. Right off the bat, I want to say Herobrine is no joke, so I'll be largely ignoring the weaker characters of the verse and focusing only on the strongest. I've made several videos on why I believe characters like Orochi, Geno, Sairochi, and Tatsumaki range from small planet to planet level, with Evil Ocean Water and Sage Centipede also scaling around these levels. Boros will get his own extra video from me sometime in the near future, but generally I believe he should bare minimum be star level. If you want to highball him and scale him to Saitama to some small degree, then he would just be a fraction of wherever Saitama scales, potentially placing him at Galaxy to higher dimensional, again depending on where you think Saitama scales. To be clear, I'm not claiming that Boros is higher dimensional or anything, I'm just saying that he is if you think he scales to Saitama to some extent, and if you think Saitama himself is that strong. But speaking of the bald guy, let's cover the cosmic tiers of power next. Garo is said by the artist of One Punch Man to be capable of shaking the universe, putting him at multi-solar system level, as that is how much energy is required to shake the universe. This is backed up and amplified by Garo being capable of recreating any cosmic phenomenon, including gamma ray bursts, which typically are around 10 to the 44 joules of energy, but can reach much higher as well. This is further amplified by Garo and Saitama's serious punch clash, creating a hole in the galaxy or the observable universe, or maybe just blocking out the light of the stars if you're feeling really stingy with the scaling. But generally this feat is considered to be between multi-solar system and multi-galaxy level, depending on how you calculate it. Then Saitama and Garo both grow exponentially stronger than they were before. If you think they fully scaled to the serious punch squared before this, they should reach universal levels of power, as multi-galactic characters growing exponentially should reach those low universal levels, provided that the universe isn't infinite. This is supported if you think that Garo being able to create any cosmic phenomenon also includes the full might of a Big Bang, which would obviously be universal. I will say if you disregard the exponential statement and just go with the linear growth showed in the graph, this would be a lot less impressive, but I'm not claiming that it is or isn't, I'm just pointing it out for anyone that's really skeptical about the whole exponential thing. And also, I guess I have to point out that if you don't think Saitama and Garo scaled to the serious punch squared at the time it happened because it's implied to be their combined power squared, then they definitely would scale to these multi-galactic levels now after the exponential growth. So this is where you would have normally gotten Saitama a year ago, but the recent redraws of the recent chapters add a lot more spice to things. Empty Void has an attack called the Dimension Slash, which is said by Blast to be interference from the higher dimension where God is located. It ignores distance, energy, and size. If you think this higher dimensional statement is referring to a mathematical dimension, this could make Empty Void 4th dimensional. I will note that the power of the move depends on the host, so Void might not be 4D even if you think the statement refers to a mathematical dimension, but then God himself definitely should be since he resides and exists in this higher dimension. This is assuming that the dimension is mathematical though. If you want to say that it's just physically located higher or just considered higher in the hierarchy of the multiverse or something, then you can try to claim that it's not a higher dimension, and if you think that it is a higher dimension, then you can try to claim that it is a higher dimension. That's not really that concrete, we don't know too much yet. But moving on, Empty Void can also grab and manipulate the fabric of space on a decent scale. This could potentially also make him 4th-dimensional. Blast says he can manipulate the cosmos on some level too. Blast and Garo can both create hyperspace portals too, and Saitama can physically interact with them. Depending on what you think and how you interpret this might be a 4th-dimensional feat as well. I will also say I've seen people claiming that this place where Void fights Blast is a dimension made by Blast and contains stars, therefore Blast should be universal. But there's no evidence that Blast is the creator of this place, it's just said to be another dimension quote-unquote, and there's nothing to say that Blast actually created it. Moving on to speed, One Punch Man has a few different metas. Going by calc, slowballed, you could say that Platinum S has consistently been calced between 4 and 24 times faster than Light, which the God tiers would massively upscale from. Going with more highball calcs for Platinum S, you could potentially get him to hundreds or thousands of times FTL, and then the God tiers would upscale. There are also some calculations for Cosmic Garo and Saitama fighting on Jupiter's moon, placing him at over 100,000 times the speed of light. And there's also another calc for Garo running away from Saitama where he statues Jupiter as its gas is being blown away, which puts exponentially faster Garo at 3.7 billion times faster than light. The highest speed scaling possible for them is using the Serious Punch Squared, which traveled an enormous distance in a very short period of time to destroy a segment of space. If you think that Saitama and Garo scaled to the speed of the blast that did this would get them to insane speeds. It highly depends on how far you think the blast reached and how long it took to reach, and then you also have to factor in how much Saitama and Garo grew in speed after this during their battle on Io, but generally I've seen this feat calc to around 2.3 trillion times faster than light for Saitama and 750 billion times faster than light for Garo. And that was taking a pretty low ball distance into the calc, so the blast of the Serious Punch Squared could arguably be a lot faster. I also have to mention the time travel thing, which many people claim puts Saitama at ridiculous levels of speed. Personally, I don't think it does, it's more so a hack's ability and technique, not physical speed. Plus, Garo and Saitama can't even do this under normal circumstances. For Saitama to gain this time travel speed, Garo would need to see enough destruction to want to turn back time, and in the heat of battle, it's unlikely that he would think of doing that. So overall, the God tier characters of the verse like Saitama, God, Cosmic Garo, and Empty Void should be at least multi-solar system to multi-galaxy level as a low ball, low universal as a mid ball, and 4th dimensional as a high ball. Speed-wise, they should be at least hundreds of thousands of times faster than light as a low ball, billions to trillions of times faster than light as a mid ball, and if you think the blast of the Serious Punch Squared traveled to the very edge of the universe, then it would be insane speeds, potentially over a quintillion times faster than light. Boros should be a few steps behind these values, and then the rest of the verse is lagging far behind at planet level or below, and a few hundred times FTL or below. And lastly, when it comes to their hacks abilities, the most prominent ones will be Saitama and Garo's adaptations and copying, Void's Dimension Slash, Blast or anyone else who can use hyperspace gates teleporting Herobrine into another dimension and removing him from the battlefield, whatever hacks God has, and yeah, that would be the main difficult hacks to overcome. I guess you could also bring up Boros' regeneration and Garo's martial arts and stuff like that, but those are kind of secondary, these are like the main big ones that'll have to be overcome. So with the odds stacked astronomically against Herobrine, how does this entity fare against the competition here? Herobrine is a very broad term, as there are literally hundreds of different incarnations of him, so for this video I will be using composite Herobrine, meaning that I will be combining every version of Herobrine I am aware of, and taking all his feats from various forms and incarnations to scale him, since he's a fan concept and not an official Minecraft character. With that being said, as much of a Herobrine nerd as I am, I haven't seen every Herobrine animation or comic or novel out there, so I'll be taking the versions of Herobrine I am aware of into account. And I will also not be covering every one of these versions either, because that would still take forever, and most of them don't scale nearly high enough or have nearly good enough hacks to be of much use for Herobrine in the battle here. So basically, I'll only be covering the Herobrines who have something to add to Herobrine's side here and ignoring the weaker ones. Now moving on to the scaling, first let's just establish something real quick. I will not be using the universal Steve meta for this video. Steve is the main guy of Minecraft and Herobrine is depicted as bullying him on a regular basis. Like damn, this one animation is particularly brutal, look at this. But back to the topic, based on how much weight he can carry, many people claim he is universal. There are some valid critiques to this way of scaling, and in general most Minecraft media doesn't take this universal meta into account, so neither will I. And trust me, we don't need universal Steve for this to be an interesting fight regardless. And secondly, I will be using a ton of material that will either make you extremely nostalgic or you will have no idea what I'm talking about. I'll try to explain everything as clearly as I can while giving all the necessary context without going into too much rambling. Now I'd like to establish his basic kit and most variations. Herobrine usually has lightning-based powers as well as instant teleportation, various close-range weapons like pickaxes, swords, scythes, axes, and so on, and is usually extremely proficient in using them, having displayed incredible close-quarters combat skills in numerous battles. With how much ridiculous nonsense he's pulled off in combat across various variations, I'd wager his skill should be comparable to even masters like Goro. This is consistent, as in a lot of variations Herobrine is portrayed as an ancient entity that's been in hundreds or even thousands of battles over his lifespan. Herobrine also has many other abilities in various variations, but these are just the ones that he's packing in almost every version. Getting into his feats and his hacks, it's difficult to think of a place to start, so I'll just go with an absolute OG. MC Jams is a channel that made up a lot of my childhood before they rolled down the hill, and one of their absolute classics is a series called The Hacker, which depicts a hacker bullying everyone else in the game. This guy is pretty much immortal. Like literally, no matter what you do, he cannot die, he cannot take damage. You can stab him, burn him, slice him, the blade enters his body but does no damage at all. Then there's this girl who can use glitch powers to bypass this immortality, and Herobrine scales above her in both glitch powers and physical stats, so he literally can negate certain types of immortality. Herobrine fights Entity 303, another glitch in a different continuity, and during the battle he displays the ability to open dimensional portals and teleports through dimensions, which if you think Blast and Goro's portals are higher dimensional, this would count as that too, especially since this version of Herobrine doesn't even need a portal to go between dimensions himself. Seriously, he can just pop through dimensions like nothing with his normal teleportation. Speaking of dimensions, this version of Herobrine also has his own dimension that's literally called the Herobrine dimension, and it takes the form of a galaxy. However, there is no indication that it's actually as large as a galaxy, and all we see is an empty void with no stars or anything, so it's questionable if this really scales Herobrine all that high, even if he created the dimension himself. But still, in this dimension, Herobrine gets a massive boost in power, and it seems like the longer he stays here, the stronger he gets, as he goes from getting bodied by Entity 303 to fighting the guy who created it and could foderize it in an instant, on even footing. The speed increase is also extremely noticeable, as Herobrine in base gets absolutely outperformed and annihilated, completely dunked on in a sword duel by this entity called Undenbrine, yeah that's a thing, when he's using 5 swords compared to Undenbrine's 1. And Undenbrine also blatantly bullies him in speed multiple times too. But then in this dimension, Herobrine gains a whole new form and is able to fight him competitively, and then together with Notch, they even straight up beat Undenbrine. Herobrine also gains access to various new abilities like manipulating the environment, creating weird hexes with lasers and DBZ energy blasts and so on. He also has some level of telekinesis. But this is just the tip of the iceberg with this Herobrine, as he is able to fight the entity known as Undenbrine, again this is a thing that exists, who is literally stated to be a threat to the entire universe of Minecraft. And this is right after we get exposition on how the universe was created by something called the Block of Imagination, and it showed planet Minecraft floating in space, so the cosmology of this version of Minecraft is universal in size, and this guy Wanpanman is a threat to all of it. Wanpanman also states that his goal is to rule over light and darkness, and this is meant pretty literally as darkness, the concept, has taken him over and giving him power. So Wanpanman literally scales to the concept of darkness itself. Yes, we're still talking about a video game hoax. Herobrine can then fight this guy. Herobrine can also utilize and manipulate the power of the Block of Imagination, and he used it to seal Wanpanman in another dimension and specifically created a key to keep him there, which he then hid in his dimension. And Herobrine is said to be the only one who possesses the power necessary to save the universe from Wanpanman. There is consistent emphasis being placed on Wanpanman and the Block of Imagination being universal. Moving on, another version of Herobrine can literally break into the code of reality itself and access Minecraft commands. To Herobrine, Minecraft is the world he lives in, so using verse equalization, he should be able to break into the code of any reality and use commands, as that is one of his powers. And even if you don't think he can use commands in any world other than Minecraft, all he needs to do is teleport his opponents to the universe of Minecraft and then he'll have the hacks. Which we know he could do, as he can freely travel between dimensions and forcibly teleport people to other realms too. Herobrine can type commands mid-battle while his physical body is fighting and being brutalized, as his mind is sort of in a space of its own with the code of the world not detached from his body but not completely linked to it either. It's weird to explain, but basically just try to think of this as him being able to type commands with his mind while his body fights. With commands, Herobrine is shown giving himself and his allies various items, changing the location of the battlefield, and literally going through dimensions and nonsense like that. Notch is shown using the /kill command, which just kills anything regardless of durability or regeneration on Herobrine, and it fails because Herobrine has entered the code and given himself resistance, but if Notch can use the command, so can Herobrine. He never used it on Notch, presumably because of the same reason that the command failed to kill Herobrine, because he's in the game's code too and free to manipulate it as he pleases, making /kill ineffective on him. But anyone without resistance to commands should just die if Herobrine uses this in battle against them. Using commands, he can also boost his speed by at least 52 times. If he can alter the code to get past the limit of commands, then he should potentially be able to increase his speed to infinity, but mid-battle it's unlikely that he would have the time to alter the code. Other commands at his disposal include giving himself super high HP, making himself extremely resilient to all types of damage, increasing his durability many times over, and so on. He could also clear the inventory of anybody he's up against, essentially removing any gear from anyone in One Punch Man, like the gadgets of all the tech-based heroes or empty void swords. He could also use /damage to deal any specified amount of damage to anyone on the opposing team regardless of durability, as again commands bypass that. He could also use /data to learn everything there is to learn about his foes. He could literally instantly become aware of all of God's or Garo's or Blasthack's abilities. Herobrine could also potentially set his own game mode to creative, making him immortal, but that's not in character for him to do, or maybe he just didn't do it against Notch because Notch also had access to command and might have been able to switch him back to survival and set his own game mode to creative, but regardless, it's something to keep in mind either way. Herobrine could also set negative status effects on his opposition, slowing them down, poisoning them, weakening them, and so on. He could increase his own power many times over with commands too. And there are plenty more commands he could make use of, but these are just the few that I think might be the most impactful. Moving on to another version of Herobrine worth covering, this is gonna get personal in the best way. From 5th to 7th grade, so around 12 to 14 years old, I, the real-life Satori, was drawing my first ever proper story. I finished it around the end of 2019 to the beginning of 2020, and I still come back to it at least a couple times per year to reread it because I am super fond of it. As a result, I have not forgotten one bit of this stuff. I know this comic by heart, and even despite how crappy and hard to understand it sometimes is, I remember the intent while I was drawing it like it was yesterday. So why am I talking about this, and what is this story? It is a Stickman comic set in the universe of Minecraft, with crappy Stickman art, plenty of rip-offs from other stories, and terrible dialogue. But it was a way for me to escape reality and got me through some hard times, as well as laid the groundwork for my path into actually writing stories later on. If there's any interest, I might do some videos covering this crappy but dear story to me, But for now, the important part is that Herobrine is a prominent character in this story, and I did say that I would be including fan material, and this is fan material, several volumes worth of it in fact. So it counts. Now this verse is kind of weird. Young me was cooking, but he did not know the recipe. The AP of these characters varies from small planetary as a low ball to literally infinite as a high ball. The small planetary value is based on some calcs that I did for this story, and the infinite value comes from a bonus page that I did a long time ago, way back when I wasn't even halfway or even a quarter of the way finished with this story. I made this little guiding page with stats so that I could keep track of who is as strong as who pretty much, and I literally marked Notch and Herobrine as having infinite power and speed and everything. All the stats are just infinite, except skill and archery for some reason, but yeah, everything else was infinite, including speed, power, and mana amount and whatnot, or magic amount, or however you want to call it, so yeah, I guess that is canon, I guess. Notch and Herobrine are also capable of casually creating and destroying and recreating the Earth until they're satisfied with how it looks, and this is the most casual thing for them. They're just kids playing in a sandcastle pretty much, or in a sandbox. So yeah, the verse is at least planetary, potentially, like I said, infinite if you want to take that one page into account. Regardless, the AP of these characters varies a lot depending on how you look at it, but the speed is where this comic just goes off the charts. In this setting, there are these tribes at war, and each of them has a gimmick. One of them is sword-based, one is made up of archers, one is giants, and the one relevant to this video, the technology guys, who regularly use various types of laser blasters, which early series characters can always react to without much trouble, and dodge them and block them all the time. This is prevalent in the very first block of the story, and the story is made up of 4 big blocks, and the scaling between these blocks always skyrockets. Just the scaling chain from this would be absolutely ridiculous, but there's more to these guys than just the laser scaling. In the third block of the comic, we get this absolutely ridiculous speed feat. There are these alien guys who can travel across galaxies in minutes using a transportation device. I told you the spikes between these blocks were massive. In particular, there's this one panel where these aliens travel from one galaxy to another in exactly 7 minutes. I specified the time here for some reason. I'm pretty sure it was meant as a plot point later on, to serve as a time crunch. Someone's in trouble, another person has to get to them in time with this transporter and whatnot, but I never really ended up using it. Regardless of intention, young me gave current me a lot to work with here. First of all, this is Earth. This tiny little dot. I thought it would be a cool Easter egg if I just included a little nod to real-life Earth, so yeah, we know this is the Milky Way galaxy. This would then be the next closest galaxy, Andromeda. Now obviously the objects on this diagram are not entirely to scale. These galaxies are super massive compared to the distance between them. And this tree right here is not galaxy sized at all, but it does give us a frame of reference for the general distances between these points. So measuring the distance between the Milky Way and Andromeda, equating it to the real-life distance between them, and then measuring the distance from this point to this point, and using the time frame of 7 minutes, we get the speed of this transportation device at this many times faster than light, which is pretty crazy. And what is even crazier then is that the main characters of this comic, with the cringiest names in the world I might add, are able to statue these transportation devices. These 2 aliens activate the devices and fly away. The 2 guys decide on blowing up the world tree they planted, long story not worth explaining in this video. Then they charge up 2 powerful attacks, and then they blow up the world tree, all in the time it takes for these transportation devices to leave this panel. This is a complete blitz, more than a blitz. So Wither King and Enderlord, Jesus Christ, scale massively above the transportation device speed. Then there is a massive scaling chain from this. Seriously, the power cliffing in this comic is absolutely bonkers. And in the end result puts Herobrine at 1.69 undecillion times faster than light, when factoring in that this composite version of Herobrine could further amp himself with speed commands and via his own dimension. For reference, that is a 1 followed by 36 zeros! I don't want to drag this video on for too long, so I will just put the scaling chain up on the screen. Speed isn't all this comic has to offer, as it also gives Herobrine a lot of neat hacks, like manipulating attractive and repulsive forces like Pain from Naruto, using truth-seeking orbs from Naruto, using interdimensional portals, and even shattering interdimensional portals, which if you think Blast and Goro's hyperspace gates are 4th dimensional, this would also make this Herobrine 4th dimensional. He can also manifest various objects like weapons, fly, manifest himself as a force ghost of all things, manipulate matter to create things like giant towers, manifest demon minions to fight alongside him, while channeling the energy of a nether star through a device, something much weaker than he himself is. Herobrine can summon a giant portal to another dimension that covers the face of the entire planet. So if you think that Empty Void manipulating space a little bit makes him 4D and Blast portals are 4D, then this should definitely count for that, as Herobrine is doing 4th dimensional warping of reality on a planetary scale. Overall, composite Herobrine scales to over an undecillion times faster than light and has universal to potentially 4th dimensional attack potency and durability. So how does this battle go? Right away, everybody other than Blast, Empty Void, Cosmic Garo, Saitama, and God are irrelevant. Both Herobrine and One Punch Man God tiers can be scaled to having relative AP and durability, but Herobrine holds a massive edge in speed. Like, a ludicrously gigantic edge in speed. On top of that, he can slow and weaken all of his foes with commands, as well as deal any amount of damage he wants with commands. I don't see anyone other than God and maybe Saitama surviving a slash kill. Herobrine can also avoid being trapped in another dimension by just teleporting out. He can casually warp through dimensions much better than Void or Blast can, so he can definitely do it. On top of that, if he ever struggles because he's fighting multiple foes, he can make minions who are at least comparable to a fraction of his speed and power, so they should be able to hold Void and Blast off for a while. Garo's copy is troublesome if Garo can perceive Herobrine before he dies, which is a very big if. Herobrine's character varies from variation to variation. Some versions of him like to toy around with his foes while others go for the kill straight away, but Herobrine here is so much faster than Garo that I doubt he'd even spare the time of day for toying around. He'd toss Garo around a bit, maybe realize Garo has comparable AP to him before just using slash kill to get rid of him before Garo could even react to any of it. But if Garo somehow does manage to copy Herobrine's speed, then things do become interesting, as their skill sets interacting would be fun to see, but Herobrine could just use slash kill at any time. It's an instant death, there's no time to copy or adapt to it. Saitama and God are the two big heavy hitters of One Punch Man, but personally I think Saitama just dies the same way Garo does. There's just no time to adapt here. Even if he begins adapting, Herobrine is gonna notice and end the fight right away. He's not dumb in most versions. God is an enigma. He might have some form of immortality. He probably does, but Herobrine can negate low-tier immortalities and scales to concepts, and could use the block of imagination to potentially seal God in another dimension. Dude, imagine if, in preparation for this battle, Blast and his crew unleash God from his seal to ensure their victory. God is elated, he goes on a monologue, he's finally free, he's creating all these plans for what to do after the fight, only to end up sealed again. That would be wild. But all in all, unless God and Saitama show us something unprecedented, Herobrine should come out with a confident victory. The winner is Herobrine. And yeah, that has been it for me today. I hope you enjoyed. I hope this video was fun or nostalgic for you. I had an unreasonable amount of fun doing this. So yeah, this was a good nostalgia trip for me. I hope you enjoyed. And with nothing else to say, I wish you a good rest of your day. Goodbye.